Okay, hello, welcome everyone. I would like to open by acknowledging that we are gathered today on the lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We pay our respect to elders past and present, and would like to extend that respect to all First Nations people present here today. Welcome everyone. You are here for the panel Opportunities for Developers, Funding, Publishing, Getting Started. That or you just need to sit down, but you will get something out of this talk regardless. I will introduce myself first. I am the chair of this panel. My name is James O'Connor. I am the game development executive here at the South Australian Film Corporation. So I have been working very hard on stage for the last few months, and I'm very happy to see you all here. Let's go down the line and introduce ourselves. We'll start with you, Goldie.
Hello, I'm Goldie Bartlett. I'm a games investment manager at Screen Australia. That's the federal funding body for video games across the country. The program there's a couple of years old, and I've been there for 8 weeks. Nice to meet you.
Congrats.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben Kirchner from the Adelaide Economic Development Agency. I work there in really about championing industry and opportunities, and so much so, like gaming is part of that, attracting that and growing that. So I've been very active in that space for several years now, trying to sort of build out that ecosystem that we have here in Adelaide.
Hello. Sorry, my voice just did a funny thing. I'm Serica, spelt Socha, pronounced Serica. I'm the Industry Relations Manager at Playside Studios. We're the largest independent game developer in Australia. Lots of people making lots of different games. And for the purposes of this discussion, it's worth mentioning a big part of our studio focuses on developing games, but we opened a publishing division just over a year ago now. So we've got about 3 titles in there. One of them's using Mickey Mouse in Mouse PI for Hire, so very cool. And hopefully I can share a bit more about what we do. And I've been in games for the last 10 years in production and customer experience or player support roles as well.
Hi, my name is Jens, and I work for the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, IGEA in short. We are the peak industry body for the video games industry in Australia. And as such, we represent the interests of the first parties, such as Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, the large publishers, but also, and very importantly, Australian game developers. That's primarily where my role comes in. As Director of Industry Member Relations, I liaise with our developer members and various stakeholders in government to see how we can best support them in terms of research, advocacy, and so on. So, you know, I mean, Ben mentioned funding before. It's kind of my role to annoy him about that, you know, making sure that, you know, there's an expo that we get some funding for and so on. But yeah, that's sort of the elevator pitch.
Excellent, and I'm so happy to have you all here with me today. Because this is a panel about getting started, I thought it would be fun to talk about where we all come from and how we all got started and what sort of brought us to where we are right now. I think across Sage, you're going to see a lot of people who have had different pathways into games and have had careers that look very different, and I really enjoy talking about that, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I got my start personally in games journalism, writing for magazines, which for people who don't know what magazines are, they used to print out pieces of paper with words on them and pictures, and you could read them, and they were lovely. And I tried to do a PhD in games narrative, didn't quite work out, wasn't for me, but I stuck around as a teacher for a while. I eventually moved into game development here in South Australia at Mighty Kingdom, working as a narrative designer. And then now I am in a governmental role. I'm looking after local funding in games, which is all of the jobs I've had are very different, and yet they are all related. Games sort of ties them all together. And I feel like I've built a strange patchwork career out of liking and caring about games. Goldie, you have done a lot of interesting things, and I would love to hear about them.
Patchwork career is going to come up a lot if you want to be a game developer, because there's such a wide variety of things that need doing, whether that's working on a game project or sort of being around people who are making games. So for my background, I was an illustrator growing up, and I was also sort of going to lots of DIY art shows in Melbourne, which is where I'm from, and looking at how artists would build community to support their own work and to support the work of their friends. And I think it's that sort of ethos that has driven my interests throughout my career. So off I went to university, did a games degree, hoping to just get better at digital art, it turns out that video games are really fascinating culturally and as, you know, a whole thing. They're fascinating. It's a fascinating thing to study. Worked as a freelancer for a couple of years after university on various projects. Got involved with the Free Play Independent Games Festival. So again, leaning into that DIY, very indie side of things. And then started working on a 7-year project. And like always happens to indie devs, on small teams, you wear several hats. So the biggest hat that I wore was as art director for that project, but ended up sort of doing a lot of our business development, marketing and social media and all sorts of other stuff, and learning a lot more about the ropes of the international industry that way. And then, I guess a bit of teaching at RMIT, a real patchwork. And now I'm at Screen Australia helping little guys get their foot through the door.
And that game was Wayward Strand, right?
Yep.
Wonderful game. Big fan.
Thanks.
Over to you, Ben.
For me, as an economic development practitioner, I've sort of worked in a range of different sort of agencies where we're trying to drive economic opportunity for the state. We're trying to encourage businesses to grow and scale. And for me, my early, I guess, introduction to was really probably through IGEA in many ways, because it was looking at, well, what is the opportunity for industry to grow? How can we retain youth in our state? What is an export orientated industry that can grow? You know, where can we bring money into our state? And really I saw it as a shining light bulb of opportunity in terms of how we can support our creative digitals. How can we feed off other parts of our sector that we have in Adelaide, like the visual effects industry? And so I saw all these sort of things around opportunity, around where we can really grow and lean into this more. We've had some really good history of games in Adelaide, which was great backbone to build out our industry. So for me, it was like, okay, as an agency, as an economic development practitioner, what can we do in a meaningful way to sort of provide uplift and build that ecosystem? And I've really loved it because they've been a really lovely bunch of people and industry to work with. So they're very friendly and welcoming all things that can support them. So one that's just drawn me in. Been an absolute pleasure to work with. You've got really great champions in our state, which also makes it really handy. And when I really started, I saw some what can we do to make things better? What can we build up the strength of our economy and strength of the ecosystem? So that's been a fabulous journey to be a part of, because I've seen some really great improvements over the 5 years or so that I've really played an active role in. You know, things like Sage, kudos. I mean, this is amazing that we've got such a brilliant event like this happening. We've got a peak association in South Australia now, which didn't exist before. And, you know, we have amazing things that happen all the time, which is really, really great. So that's how I've been involved in, and it's, you know, I've just really enjoyed it, to be honest. And that's coming from someone that's not a hardcore gamer by any means, you know. But I can see really how I can add value to that.
Hello. So my background is also a little patchwork, so to speak. So I studied communication design a long time ago and graphic design, and that was cool, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. Very early, about 10 years ago, 10 or plus now, I did some community management and moderation for Minecraft, and I got paid for that, and I was like, that's cool, can I do more of this? And then that ended up turning into full-time work. So I followed my journey doing player support, community management, managing teams, and then into production, and then now into this role. So I've worked across like small and big companies and had a good opportunity to see a really interesting perspective in terms of working both with clients and pitching games to clients, and also making concepts for clients, but also now at Playside, we have the publishing division and seeing what we look for as a company. And then on the other side of that, being a player, of course, too, and looking at that really broad spectrum. So I think it's important to consider that there are a lot of different ways you can enter the industry. And from the publishing and funding point of view, there's a lot more available now. We've got rebates and grants, and then we have publishing as well, and then people that start their own studios. So I think we're in a much better position at this point, and yeah, keen to share more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a passion for video games. Ever since I was 5 years old, I've been playing games on C64, Mattel and Television. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you my biography in real time, but I channeled that energy into fairly academic outlets. I did a master's degree on games, on the history of games in East Germany, which was later published as a book, and then I did a PhD on games, specifically on the difference in perception of video games in my native Germany and Australia, and how that's different due to the different histories of the country. And when I did that, I did a bit of work for a Berlin-based game studio, then moved to Australia. My wife is Australian, that's why I ended up here. And, was working in various education-related roles. I ran a creative media college. I was associate dean at one stage at Torrance University. And then this opportunity came along, and I jumped on it, and still feel very privileged that I get to do this role, because it really allows me to live that passion for games and support an incredibly creative ecosystem with some really lovely people making great stuff. So I feel certainly very privileged, lucky to be in this role, and looking forward to discussing how we can get more of you into this industry.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So just by show of hands in the crowd, how many of you are here in this room right now because you or somebody you care about wants to get into game development in some direction or another, either short-term, long-term? Basically everyone. Okay, that's wonderful. Well, that's great, because that's what we're here to talk about. So I want to get into some of the opportunities that are available to game developers in Australia, some of the opportunities that we can talk about directly through the organizations we work for, and just some general advice for people looking to start out. So here in South Australia, we have the video game development rebate, which I can speak to. That is for companies that have scaled up to a point where they have projects that have an expenditure of $250,000 or more. So a little more established quite often. Teams that have been working for a while and have gotten their game far along in development and gotten some funding. And it is a way of retaining talent in the state and making sure that our largest developers have extra incentives for continuing to develop here. It has been a big boon for some local teams. And that has been really good. We have seen new studios opening up in South Australia, like Tantalus South, and of course Big Ant, our platinum sponsor at the event today, opened a studio in South Australia within the last few years, and that's been really wonderful. They have been hiring up many very talented people, which has been great. Goldie, I know that you are brand new at Screen Australia, so I'm not going to ask you to go too deep on anything, but I would love a bit of an overview of some of the funding opportunities. This for people who are starting at zero.
Okay. Screen Australia is really lucky to be able to provide a fair bit of funding. We've got 4 different funds. I'll touch on 2 of them very briefly, because I'm not going to talk about them. One is the Games, Festivals and Events Fund. Fantastic opportunity for people in the industry to put on events or throw festivals to celebrate games and get developers together. We have the Future Leaders Delegation annually, which selects emerging game developers from around the country, brings them to Melbourne for some workshops to prepare to pitch their prototypes. Then we fly them over to San Francisco for the Game Developers Conference. So that's two of our grants. The 2 that are probably our showstoppers are the Games Production Fund, which is a fund of up to $100,000 for an incorporated studio to work on an established prototype. So you apply for the funding when you have a prototype to show, and you can have a couple of different outcomes in mind, whether it's a vertical slice or a finished product, for example. It's pretty hands-off once you have the money. We are there to support you along the way, but we don't tell you how to make your game. So it's different to a publisher relationship, but it might help you find a bit more time to work towards finding a publisher relationship. The grant that I'm probably a bit more excited to talk to you about today is the Emerging Game Makers Fund, which is a grant of up to $30,000. You don't need to have a prototype to apply for it, or rather, you don't need to have a prototype built, you do need to have obviously an idea for your prototype to apply for it. That's a really fun one to look at. It's very competitive at the moment, of course. There's a lot of young people who want to get into making games, but Screen Australia would always have our emails open to people who want to ask questions about it. Yeah.
And there are several games that are exhibiting at Sage this weekend that have received some of that funding. What have we got? We've got Anvil Heart. They received the funding. We have The Troll in the Witch's House.
Yes.
We have some that haven't been announced, I think.
We have several that haven't been announced. We may have a future leader delegate in the room right now who I cannot point to.
Incredible. So that's been really lovely. And South Australians have been... I think I looked at the breakdown, and the percentage of South Australians applying is above the percentage of South Australians who live in Australia. So that's, it's got to be a less awkward way to phrase that. But and then, Ben, I would love to hear more about some of the things you have been offering for local developers, because when I came into this role about 9 months ago, people said, you've got to go and meet Ben. He does so much just quietly for local developers. And the more I've gotten to know you, the more people I've wanted to point in your direction. So I would love to hear a bit more about what the Adelaide Economic Development Agency has been doing for local developers.
It's been really a lot of fun, as I said, great working with people like you, James, and others. But, my focus on it has been really to help a range of fronts. So one is, I guess, when you've got community, when you've got connection, when you've got... that's a really good fundamental way to sort of immerse yourself into the industry and learn from others. So one way we do that is we fund the South Australia's Gaming Associations. We've been doing that for quite a long time now. And initially that's been really just meetups, really. We'll just, and that's a really great light way to sort of just meet and connect. So they're bi-monthly meetups that happen in the city. Really, you can connect with other studios, indies, larger firms, education providers, but really just a nice, safe environment to connect. So, in one way of just actually, if you're still trying to navigate, it's just about meeting and connecting and finding your people. That's a really great way of just doing that, Another way we do, and I guess, is we do it through Games Plus. Games Plus is a co-working place in the city, on Perry Street. That's been a fabulous spot for indies to start and grow. But we also, in terms of just helping people get immersed into the ecosystem and navigate some of their pathways, we provide scholarships where you can have a dedicated desk or a hot desk there. Now, that's a really fabulous way to sort of just, again, connect with other studios, connect with other operators. In that co-working space, you've got quite a variety of people, at various stages. So just that opportunity to really, immerse yourself and find your own pathways. You might come in there as a student. You might come in there as you're still just exploring. But what would I encourage you? You can apply, put in what your milestones are, what you want to achieve through the program. We'd very much welcome. We really encourage diversity through that as well. So really trying to grow out, being a bit more inclusive in terms of including more women in games and things like that. So please have a look at that. If you want to know any information, please reach out to me or look at that through Games Plus. Another way we help is, I guess, when you're an indie, you are pretty tight on budgets and not being able to afford to do what you'd like to do, and your money's really skint in many ways, and it's hard to sometimes apply for some of these bigger grants because you're still yet ground testing your product, you're not sure where it is, and so we at times just give very small sponsorships to really complement people's efforts when they're looking to go overseas to trade shows or to educational opportunities such as GCAP in Melbourne. GCAP, I got it right, didn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. So GCAP, Games Connect Asia Pacific, that's the games conference that we organise.
Wait till he says MIGWA.
So we really try to work collaboratively with the other agencies to really make that happen. It's about pooling a bit of money to make it happen. For those ones that are really probably got they're getting on that commercial journey, really, of sort of having a product that needs a bit more input on things. So we do provide that as well as another support. But, you know, other things we do, I think I'm just going to do a shout out because we're a sponsor today, but really a sponsor to showcase youth options. Youth options it's in the foyer there, but they're really providing a fantastic program which offers a program which is offering neurodiverse people to be involved in game testing and bug testing. So another little interesting pathway to get into the industry. So if you wanted to explore that, go and have a look at youth options and have a bit of a chat to them about that today.
We are so happy to have youth options here this weekend. I'm just absolutely delighted to see that stand. Let's stay on the subject of networking and meeting people and knowing who to talk to and all of these things. Earlier this week, we held an event at Game Plus that was presented by the South Australian Film Corporation, which was a conversation with John Cartwright, a local consultant who has been a producing publisher on several local hit games. That might not be his exact official title, but he helped out on Conscript, which was the Australian Game Developer Awards Game of the Year last year. He helped out on Dredge, which was a huge hit out of New Zealand, seeing a lot of head nods. I bought it on my PlayStation, but haven't played it yet. He has a lot of very valuable insights, and we managed to get a large crowd of people into Game Plus on Wednesday to go over that. And that was a great opportunity we were able to offer. And it's had me thinking about other opportunities to connect with people. Ben, you mentioned Unwind a moment ago, which is a bi-monthly event held by the South Australian Games Association, which is unrelated to the South Australian Games Exhibition, but similar acronyms. That's been a really fantastic place to meet other developers and find out what is happening within our state. One of the most well-attended events of its kind in the country as well. Regularly gets over 100 people attending, which is fantastic. But I would like to hear from the rest of you about opportunities you can see for getting to know other developers who will be able to be in your corner, help you out, cheer you along the way, but also point you in the right direction when necessary.
I'm speaking from the Melbourne perspective, but I think it's still valuable to this area too. Of course, you've got things like Games Week and GCAP and wonderful opportunities like that, but often it's, I believe you guys have South Australian Game Developers Discord, so that would be a great starting point, and I can't speak to that. But if you look at those networks and just start with one and have conversations, just be interested in meeting people and curious, and remember that networking is networking, but you're ultimately just talking to other humans. And once you've made a couple of connections, you'll find that maybe they'll go, hey, I've got this developer lunch on, do you want to come? And you'll meet other people through that. And you end up just kind of naturally building your network as well as attending those events. Often there's groups on Facebook as well. We have the IGEA group, we have local groups for each community and each city too. And then, of course, attending events like this and talking to the developers, seeing what they're doing, just being curious too. If you go in asking for a job, that's not usually the best way to start a conversation, but just being interested in what they're making and even learning about them as a person.
And you'll find that the industry is incredibly supportive. Like, it's very mutually supportive. So people are very happy to support each other. There is not really any sort of rivalry or competition. Keep in mind too that Australian developers don't share the same market, right? Like, there is the structure of the industry, as opposed to, say, film and television, is such that you serve a massive market, mostly overseas. So that also helps in that respect. But I always find that people are incredibly generous with their time. So don't be afraid to network, get yourself out there. Like, it's going to be a positive experience, and it's incredibly important. On many levels. I mean, when I was still in education, I would always encourage my students to attend those meetups. And I know students who got jobs before they officially graduated because they brought along their portfolio, they liaised with people in the industry and get some valuable feedback and were offered a job. I mean, I guess there's also the things that we do as an association, as a member association. So we certainly facilitate the exchange between our members, be it via Discord. We've had a mentorship program, or, you know, if someone approaches me, it's like, hey, you know, we're thinking of pivoting the company in a new direction. I will, of course, then connect them to other members who've done this before and can assist. So there's a lot of value and knowledge within that network that we're also trying to harness for more education-based initiatives, making that knowledge systematically available. So that, you know, when you're just about to start, you can tap into that wealth of knowledge and have a bit of a head start.
The thing about the games industry is that almost all of us are nerds, so people are going to be friendly and on the level.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had a graduate, actually, she's now a mid-level artist, but after 1 year, totally skyrocketed her career. And before she left her study, she was at some networking events and just really put herself forward in a fantastic way, got her folio, was like, that's great. And then she took a little break, and a year later we hired her. So she's there now and killing it. So it really, it does help to, it is about who you know, but not in the sense that that's the be all and end all, but to have those connections are really valuable.
Yeah, so by supporting other people and their work, you kind of find a place within the cycle, don't you? Yeah.
Let's sort of jump forward a little bit in our imaginations and imagine that you have taken on board all of this advice and you've started developing a game, and you have reached a point where it started to become a serious practice, and you need to start thinking about what you're doing from a business perspective. How am I going to make money off of this? How am I going to turn this into a real thing beyond the way I'm spending
Nobody
money?
knows the answer to that.
Maybe they don't, but we can provide some insight, hopefully. So I would love to talk a little bit about, maybe it sounds a little boring, but the idea of starting to consider your game making as a business and what the starting point for that maybe should look like. This is assuming you're going down an indie route. Obviously, we have a panel tomorrow about joining a game studio and the advantages of that, where we'll get into this a lot more. But yes, I can see Sarika's about to say something.
All of us
You go, Goldie.
If there's many pathways into how to become a business, and how that looks to you is also important. You could want to sell lemonade on the side of the road, and that's your business. Totally great. But if you want to apply for funding with Screen Australia, you do need to be incorporated. You do need to have a lawyer, or legal advice at least. And you know,
I mean, view yourself as a business to begin with, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
be across what that means. And that may be a bit boring, but you mentioned a lawyer and such things as chain of title. What does that mean? If I hire people, what am I supposed to do here? You know, what does paying super actually mean?
Yeah.
You know, the business hygiene. And I know that's not very riveting stuff, but it's incredibly important. And you mentioned incorporated, like, you know, make sure you know who owns what in a studio, because once you get funding and maybe a publishing deal, there needs to be a clarity as to who owns stock in that studio. And that, you know, just some examples, but it's...
Well, feel free to have a 2, 5, and 10-year plan. You know, if you want to relax for 2 to 5 years, just having fun, releasing stuff as a freelance sole agent, do it, because the experience and network building that can happen in that time before you become so busy as you run a business is invaluable. As well.
That's a really good point.
Because there are some children in the audience, I will note as well, you don't have to necessarily, you can start tinkering before you start taking things seriously.
Go on
well.
Roblox.
And I think there's a really important thing to consider, that there's running a business, and then there's making games for the joy of making games. And you have to decide what you want to do. So you can make a game for 5 years and it might not do well. So think about, it's okay to make games and enjoy that as a hobby, or even just to focus on a small game, and maybe you don't want it to be a huge success and to make a lot of money, you just really enjoy that, and that's okay. But if you consider that, say, I don't know the exact number, but the average minimum salary, and what would that be, between 4 to 6K a month. So you times that by, say you want a 5-person team, That's a lot of money. And if you get vertical slice funding of up to 500K, how long is that going to last you? And that's just for funding the game. So that's not even thinking about outsourcing, marketing, and so forth. So just to consider that line of art and games and hobbies and so forth.
All of a sudden, when you have to think about stuff like that, you can be very distracted from the art that you're trying to make. So think carefully about whether you are pursuing art or craft or business. And is there a way for you to do that successfully? It's tough.
Yeah, $500,000 sounds like so much money until you're running a company with it.
And if you are interested in that, a lot of courses will teach you about all the roles, and it's worth learning about production and budgets and so forth as well, just to at least have a little understanding of, okay, one person, their salary is this times 1 month is that. Even that in itself will help you start thinking about that perspective.
Yeah. A lot of the games we have at Sage over this weekend have been building this game for a long time, working on making it as good as they can, and many of them are now at the stage where they want to start going to publishers to try to get publisher interest and to get some extra funding and support for the development of their game. So a big focus of a lot of the information sessions we have been running and the intensives we have been running with developers is trying to get them thinking more about how to effectively promote and pitch their game to publishers. And obviously, we did a 4-hour session on this week, so we probably can't get into that much detail in the remaining 15 minutes of this panel. But I would like a bit of insight, especially from you, Serica, because you did such a wonderful job in the activities we ran here yesterday with some of our teams about some considerations that people should be taking on as they're designing a game that they want to be able to pitch and eventually make real money out of.
Yeah, so we talk about running a business versus making a game. A lot of making a successful game is determining market fit, to put it simply. So you can have a good game. Will it be successful is another story. And that's, if you go and if it's a whole topic in a day in itself, but long story short, you look at the trends. So are you making another Fortnite? Probably not a good idea. There's a lot of people playing that already. If you're making something unique, what are the mechanics or the ideas that you can do differently? Or is there a new platform like virtual reality where maybe there's not as many people playing it as other platforms? So that's a great opportunity to focus on that. So that's one part is market fit, and the other part is obviously having really strong game concept. So before you even get to pitching, being really clear on how you're going to make the game, budget, time, cost, genre. The vision is really clear and strong, and you're confident in that. You could answer any question and your pitch is simple and clear. Maybe you have a prototype, but being certain on what it is you're making and what's going to be unique, not just in mechanically, but about your team or your company and what you can offer someone as a publisher too.
And research publishers as well. Not every publisher is going to be interested in any type of genre, right? So a good example is Australian-based Fellow Traveller, who are very focused on narrative games. So if you're working on some action shooter, they probably don't want to have that conversation. So just making sure you do a bit of research before and the resources out there to have an idea what these publishers are focusing on, so you can actually have a proper directed conversation.
Yeah, it's when you're ready to, you can also often email them and say, hey, are you interested in this genre? They'll get back to you with a very short email, yes or no. So.
Sure thing. Let's pull all the way back to the idea of getting started, because now we've been sitting here, we've talked about a lot of the nitty-gritty of the industry, a lot of the difficult parts, but let's imagine that you have somebody in the crowd right now and you know that you love games and you know that you want to work in games and you're not entirely sure what to do beyond that or how to get started or what your first step should be in terms of actually sitting down and starting to make games and figure out how all of that works. What sort of general advice can we give to people who have just figured out they want to work in games and don't entirely know what that means yet?
I would always advocate for studying formally. If you're inclined to do that, study is a fantastic way to get into any field that you're vaguely interested in. Just like, obviously you learn a lot, but also the exposure to other people who are passionate. And the networking stuff that was brought up before is really going to help you also build those connections if you don't want to study.
And, you know, the tools are very accessible these days. Like, you have access to Unity, to Unreal, and modding, or Fortnite experiences. Like, that is all really valuable experience. So if you're just starting, if you're still in school, have a look at those tools, get your head around it, just create a simple game, complete something, create a Fortnite experience. So there are a lot of really accessible tools, and it's a great way to start. I mean, modding has been a really good segue into the industry for decades now, and it's still really worthwhile to explore that. So that's a really good, very basic way to start. And a lot of those tools won't cost you anything.
And I'll give you a quick overview of all the different stages. So if you're in high school, great opportunity to look at workshops that you might find at a local university, do some online game jams, obviously keep in mind the theme and everything. Look at what the courses are offering, go and do YouTube tutorials, and actually just look at jobs. So if you have a favorite game and there's a feature that's being developed, look at that on YouTube. See, how did Horizon Zero Dawn make this environment? Go and explore that. And then when you're in uni, you can try different things. But it's really all about your folio. That will be the thing that shines through. So craft that around the type of studio or the types of things you want to be doing.
Practice. Treat it as a practice, something that you need to do to get better at and enjoy.
Yes, and keep coming to these advice panels because a lot of them are sort of focused on similar information. We also have several of the local universities and educational institutes sponsoring Sage. So we have representatives from Flinders University, University of SA, CDW. There's some folks from AIE floating around. I think there's at least some people in the crowd even who are working for these places. Yep, hello. So if you approach those booths, you ask questions, you will get answers, which is what we are ultimately all here for, I think.
Yeah. Look, I would also encourage you to have a look at the IGEA website. Sorry to be a bit self-promotional here, but it is also my job to liaise with educators to ensure that they cross the needs of the industry, to ensure that they produce graduates that are fit for the roles. And as part of that, we have, for example, produced a resource called the Skills Matrix, which is an overview of roles in studios of different size and the expectations with regards to skills that you need to bring to the table. A bit outdated, we're working on it, but still gives you a really good idea. We're also doing every year an education summit for students. And that is, again, the idea is to sort of lift the veil a bit and make very visible the expectations of the industry. How does programming at, say, Playside actually work? What do they want to see? What needs to be in my portfolio? How do they interview? So it's sort of part of our role as well to make that quite visible, to ensure that there is a steady stream of talent into the industry, but also a steady stream that's well informed as to what the expectations really are. So have a look at that. We do have some resources there for various roles, and it's our intention to keep expanding on that.
And I know Ben was going to say something.
Yeah.
I guess when you're thinking, am I going to be employee or am I going to be in business? I think if you're going to think about that business chart, that really just thinking about, am I suited to be a business operator? What are the fundamentals of being a business operator? What are the types of things that I need to consider? Because if you're going to go that direct, you've got to probably work out, am I the right person, or have I got the skill sets, or what am I going to need to bring in to make that work? So I think really understanding what does it mean to run a business. It doesn't matter what business at times. It could be a gaming business or it could be a shopkeeper. There's going to be very similar things you're going to have to still do. And managing staff, people, cash flow, contract management, all these sort of fundamental skills, they could be way off what you might want to be doing. I just want to focus on the art. But there's fact is that there's some of the things that you're going to have to do to run a business. So I think exploring that and understanding of that, what is the expectations of running a business and running a gaming business? There's going to be nuanced differences, but there is a range of different things you can go to. The state government runs these business fundamental workshops, things that really can just give you that little bit of a taste of what does it actually mean to be a business operator. And that's just it could be a useful tool to sort of go, what direction, what pathway. It might not be right for me now. Or maybe I'll go and do some training. Maybe I'll be an employee for a while. Maybe I'll have a passion project first. That'll be a start. Before then, I might then actually run my own thing. A lot of times you see in many cases, some people might work for a studio, and then they'll have their passion project on the side, you know what I mean? They'll build that up, they have that, but ultimately we've still got to have bread and butter on the table, and thinking about those sort of things can be pretty important. Pay the rent, all those things. You don't want to sort of put yourself in a stressful situation that's not really going to burn you out really, really quickly, because I think that's a bit to say. There is a bit of burnout at times if you probably put yourself in some stress. That would be fair to say?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be mindful of that and not to exploit yourself. And I really appreciate the point you're bringing up of, going into the industry, making, games with a large studio and then maybe doing your own thing. So it also goes to show the importance of a vital ecosystem that allows you to do just that.
That's exactly the pathway that we see again and again and again is like young graduates who either go to work for somebody else or have the side projects going on and then think, I can do this and give it a whirl. I was going to say that in my short time at Screen Australia, more and more I'm hearing talk of all of the states and us wanting to offer more or find more opportunities for that training and for that exposure to running your own business. It's a good step, I think, for the next 5-10 years of Australia.
And I think just to recap on that, it is an industry, we talked about this in the last panel a lot, that's always evolving and changing. So you're always going to be learning. And I think keep that in mind too when you're wanting to avoid burnout, because there's a lot of roles that are animation, technical art, all are very interesting and creative and collaborative and technical roles. And you will want to spend some time exploring and learning more about that. So keep that in mind when you're choosing what you want to do.
One just last little point is if you're interested in indie games, make sure you're looking at strange sites like itch.io, which is basically a portfolio site for very small developers to release very small projects. It gives you a taste of what's happening kind of as an artistic medium in case you're not quite ready to dive into the commercial space of games. Make sure you're looking at the strange stuff.
A lot of those games are free and can be played in a browser, which is also very good. It's good to get a good education of the different games that are coming out. Just for my own little bit of self-promotion, if you subscribe to the South Australian Film Corporation's newsletter, we will put any opportunities that we are aware of or are helping out with for local developers in there. That is how a lot of people learned about the John Cartwright information session we held earlier this week. Obviously, in the upcoming weeks, a lot of that is going to be about what a big, cool success Sage was. Even as you're going out on the floor over the weekend, you're going to see a lot of very interesting game makers who have made really wonderful games. All of them are going to have stories about where they came from and why they are making the games they are making and the people who supported them along the way and how meaningful that was for them, how they got started. The thing about people who make games is they are usually very happy to talk to you about how and why they make games. They're always happy that you are not their aunt at Christmas time asking if you are designing the new Mario game, which is a real question I did get at a Christmas once. And I'm not, by the way. So, this is a great opportunity to meet local game makers and to start building those connections, even if it just means that you can put names to faces and you have a strong sense of the games being made here. I've been in this role for 9 months now, and I felt coming in that I had a strong sense of the games being made in South Australia and how strong the scene was. And as it turns out, I knew like a thin slice of what is really happening here. There are so many interesting, cool projects, and they all have stories about how they got started and what brought them to where they are now. So, I guess you're already at Sage, so I don't need to tell you too much how good Sage is and why you should be here. But I hope that people will enjoy playing all the games. We don't really have time for questions, but if people are happy to sort of stick around afterwards, if anyone has anything they would like to come up and ask any of us about, we will be here. I think that about wraps it up. So thank you to our panelists here for all of your wonderful insights.
And thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.